What the fuck?
Gets me every time. And then Nsima left his microphone next to the computer, so it's going to be loud.
No. Good.
Much better.
Got my element here. I haven't had it this morning, and I know why I feel a little, because I'm not dehydrated.
Gotta get that hydration in.
Yeah, man. Shoot, I am.
Give you something tasty to drink, you know. You get tired of drinking water all the time, and then plus water can kind of dilute you. So it's nice to get those electrolytes in there, get the sodium, get the potassium in there, magnesium, and you know, because I do like low carb and some fasting, I'm still able to get some good pumps in the gym, get some good muscle contractions without getting a cramp.
Yeah. How about that that vascularity after having some element?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Get them veins showing.
That's definitely one of my favorite byproducts of, you know, taking some element is doing a couple of bicep curls, and all of a sudden it's like, hey, like, I'm looking pretty good right now. It's a cool feeling, you know what I mean? What flavor did you go
man.
with?
It's naranja. You know what that means, mi amigo?
Yep. It means lemon juice, right?
Shut up. It's orange. I thought I'd go orange.
I'm sipping on orange myself as well.
Yeah, but man, people that are like in prep, just every athlete, but just like, it's so important just because it has such a direct influence on the way that you perform in the gym. Not cramping up, being able to actually send the right signals to your muscles to contract, like it makes a huge difference. And like, even I was like, right before this episode, I was like, why am I feeling a little bit, you know, kind of tired? And I was like, oh yeah, that's why you didn't. I always usually have one of these in the morning, but I didn't have one this morning. I just had coffee. So let's go.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, it was funny. And Nsima pointed this out not too long ago, but I definitely have not gone a day without Element since we partnered up with Element. We've all had them before, but since partnering up with them and then having Element at the ready, it's something that I do not miss, and Nsima doesn't miss, Mark doesn't miss. We have it every single day, and it's just there's a lot of benefits to it, and some of the hidden benefits that we're learning through like user experiences has been pretty awesome as well. But for more information or to pick some up right now, head over to drinklmnt.com/power project. You guys will see a little bit of more information about how we use it, what they're all about, and again, some of the breakdown of what the ingredients are and how it's zero sugar hydration. Tastes incredible, and it's just it's pretty awesome. The flavors that they're coming out with lately have been just spot on. But head over there right now. You can pick up a free Element recharge pack. You just pay $5 shipping. You get a 8 sample pack, or you can buy the value bundle, which is getting 4 boxes for the price of 3. Highly recommend you guys do that, because once you start trying it out, you guys aren't going to really want to go back to normal ass water or any other kind of like store-bought wannabe hydration drinks. That's at drinklmnt.com/power project. Make sure you guys head over there right about now.
Yo, peeps, let's talk about simplifying some nutrition, and let's talk about just kind of implementing a food list. Nsima, where do you think is a good place for somebody to start when it comes to embarking on a journey of getting in better shape?
Okay, so I think one of the biggest places where most people should be starting is with the place that everyone likes to make fun of bodybuilders for: protein. Everyone likes to be like, oh, you eat your protein, or you're having your protein
Protein.
about a bit of protein. Yeah, honestly, protein is where to start, just because most people are under eating protein. It's, it's the freaking building blocks of muscle. It helps you maintain muscle, helps you gain muscle, and it helps you stay full, right? Yeah. So I would say start there and make sure you're getting in enough, because a lot of people are not eating enough protein each day, and it plays a big role in terms of how hungry they feel, their body composition. So having a good list of protein in terms of foods, I think we can start there. That's where I'd want people to start.
getting that protein can help manage hunger, can help push down cravings. So, very simply, you want to start with protein, be protein focused, have protein be the priority. And then you kind of just surround your diet with the rest of the macronutrients. And so from protein, then you got some fat calories usually come with your protein, especially if you're eating some yummy, delicious forms of protein. Then there'll be things like whole eggs and cheese and red meat, salmon, things like that. There'll be some fat calories that accompany it, and so that kind of takes care of the fat macronutrient. You don't have to go way out of your way to consume fat because it's kind of ends up in a lot of things, but you do want to make sure that you have some sort of fatty-ish food in there so that you're not eating too low of fat. And then in terms of carbohydrates, I mainly get my carbohydrate sources from vegetables and sometimes some fruit. And sometimes I don't eat either one of those. So usually my sources of energy come from protein and fat. And I think one of the most important things that people can work on is just to go off of a food list. Create a food list, and we're going to go over that today. Have a food list and have that be your shopping list, and you don't have to really worry about nutrient timing, what you eat right before you train, what you eat after you train. You don't have to worry about what you eat before you go to bed and when you wake up and all these different things. You don't have to necessarily be focused on fasting. You can eat when you're hungry. You can eat until you're satisfied enough, and you can kind of just do that day in and day out, and your calories will start to balance themselves out. This is the stuff that I've been talking about for a really long ass time. Not that there's anything wrong with counting your calories, not that there's anything wrong with going off of like a somebody giving you like a meal, like kind of a meal plan, but I'd rather see people learn how they can eat, so they can incorporate it, and it can run run in concert with their lifestyle rather than have it be something that's like interruptive of their lifestyle.
Yeah. And I just want to go back to the protein first thing. And I have my ceiling fan on super high because it's getting hot. So let me know if it's like too loud into the microphone or anything like that, and I can tone it down a bit. But this comes from a conversation I was having with my wife last night. We were just randomly talking about what junior high lunch looked like and what high school lunch looked like when we had a little bit more freedom to choose what we wanted to eat. And the options were really bad. And this was not, I mean, like the school lunches themselves probably had, the standard American diet in mind or whatever. But I'm talking about like the student store or whatever you want to call it, like the snack bar. Like that's where we spent our money. And, both of us, everything that we ate was 100% carbs, like little to no protein. I'm talking like cookies, pizza, fries, just desserts and stuff. And in regards to having protein first, if I could go back and put protein first, it would set me up for amazing habits that would really help sustain my nutrition habits for the rest of my life. And so I think, because we have our little kiddo here, and we have Jasmine, who's now 13 years old, and these are things that I want to implement in their lives, and I want them to learn as early as possible. And so that's why it was kind of heavy on our minds. But in regards to putting protein first, it can really just set you up for the rest of your life to never really even have to worry about being on a diet. You just you get your protein in, and everything else will kind of land where it should. And I just wanted to emphasize that thing, especially for anybody that has kids. It's like, man, if we can teach them how to get protein in first and enjoy it, and they'll never have to worry about anything as they grow up. They might want to have a certain focus somewhere, which once they get that protein in, like I said, I sound like a broken record, but once they get that part down, whatever they want to do after that will just come significantly easier then.
Absolutely. Like when I was growing up, that's kind of why all of this is kind of easy for me because my mom kind of set me up really well. She had quite a bit of meat in my diet. She didn't stray away from me eating meat, but I ate a lot of whole foods. I didn't eat a lot of prepackaged foods. I didn't eat a lot of snack foods. And I think that it's interesting. People, like, we all enjoy food. We all like food to taste good. But I think that sometimes we worry too much about something being so palatable, and not what it can actually do. And you can make a lot of these simple foods, meat, rice, all this stuff. You can make it taste really good. So it doesn't need to be something that you don't actually enjoy. But I think it would be beneficial, especially if you're starting out, to just stick to a few foods first. Stick to a few foods and venture out, because it's kind of funny. When I look at what I eat on a day-to-day basis, legit, I think I can put the amount of types of food I eat, I can put that maybe on one hand. I eat steak, different cuts. I eat eggs. I eat rice every now and then. I'll have some random fruit, but I don't have any fruit in the house. It's not like I think fruit's bad. It's just I haven't bought any in a minute. So steak, eggs, rice. I haven't eaten potatoes in a minute, but I make this food taste really good. I'm trying to think of what else. I have Greek yogurt from time to time. I have milk. There's whey protein, right? But it's like, these are the things that I eat each day. I get a good amount of protein. I get a good amount of carbs. If I need carbs, I get a really good amount of fat since I eat red meat. I get some fish and some turkey and whatever because I have the eat right stuff. But that's pretty much what I eat. And the funny thing is, again, I don't feel like I'm dieting ever, right? I don't feel like I'm restricting either, even though the amount of foods I eat is like so simple. So if you can just make your food list pretty simple, and then when you get bored, you can start adding some things in. If you're truly someone who's like, I'm bored of this, or I'm getting tired of eating the same thing, then you can slowly just start to add things in, but have a primary list that you turn to and say, this is what I eat. And then even when you go out, you can just make sure to get some foods on that list. So if you go to potentially like a burger joint or something, like, okay, there's going to be a bun or whatever, but just get the foods on the menu that are on your list and just stick to that for a little bit.
This is, there's many reasons on why I'm not a huge fan of counting calories, but to me, it's intrusive into my lifestyle, and it makes things like going out, it makes it more difficult. I understand there's like apps and stuff and people can kind of track things that way and so forth, but it is very, very difficult to go out to any sort of restaurant and to eat anywhere without consuming a lot of calories, without getting an abundance of fat calories coming from, the different oils and different stuff they're going to use on a lot of your food. But one of the things that's really easy to do at any restaurant, you could do this I can't even really think of places where you wouldn't be able to do this. But you can eat very low carbohydrate at nearly every single spot. So to combat the fact that you're going to probably get a surplus of fat, to combat the fact that you're going to probably really just love the flavor of what it is they're cooking with and how they prepared the meal, because they're going to mix ingredients at restaurants. You can kind of take a low carb, kind of style to it, and you can order a salad, you can get a steak, you can get some vegetables with it. You could fill yourself up really well. And again, it was like you didn't have to, bring a scale with you, or you didn't have to, type it into your app or whatever. Because I think over time, if you stick to a food list, if you stick to specific foods, over time, you're going to learn to eat less anyway. The foods that you're used to eating, the foods that you're used to consuming, those are foods that are normally very hyper palatable. They're very, very easy to overconsume calories on. I actually think that part of the allure of counting calories is to simply allow you to eat foods that you should not be eating anyway. So this is why I've been kind of preaching about this for a long time is, hey, let's just really disconnect from some of those foods that we shouldn't be eating. They are more detrimental than we even give them credit for. The amount of things that these foods are doing to us, I don't think we fully comprehend at the moment. And I don't want to sound like a nutrition freak about it or a fitness freak about it, but I really do think that they are detrimental. It doesn't mean that it doesn't mean you can't have room for them. But simply getting a food list together. My food list is very similar to Nsima's. I don't even really usually eat rice, just because rice is just another opportunity for me personally to overeat. So I don't eat it. I stick to the foods that I know that I'm not going to overeat. Another example of that would be like with something like yogurt. I don't buy flavored yogurt because I know that I'll overeat on it. So I buy plain yogurt, which is kind of disgusting. But I've learned to kind of just like it. Sometimes I'll throw protein powder in there with it, and it's just more protein. I eat cottage cheese, various forms of meat, eggs, fruit, vegetables, and
butter.
I'll have potatoes here and there. Yeah, butter, sour cream, stuff like that. Just kind of occasionally. But that's pretty much my food list, and I stick to that. And I think, just to reiterate a little bit more on what you said about your list is very short. Mm-hmm. So if you think about anybody that's new at anything, or anytime we want adherence with anything, when somebody goes in and they're really rehabilitating their elbow or their knee or their groin or whatever, the hip injury or something like that, whenever those people are successful, they're usually just given 1 to 3 things to do, so that it keeps it simple, so it's something that they can stick with for a long period of time. You want to do the exact same thing with your food. You don't want it to be so bland that you cheat every couple days, but at the same time, you want it to be you don't want it to be complicated or complex, because you're going to probably fall apart and not really remember what to do or how to do it. And so keep that food list real short, and that should be a great way for you to be successful.
Yeah, I going back to the strictly photography days, I used to call it hitting base hits. I'd have a complex shoot or something where we'd have tons of products, tons of models, tons of movements, and I had this idea of what I wanted to capture, but I had to at least get some guys on base. I had to hit a couple of base hits so that way at the end of the day, if everything went to shit, I at least had this product shot, I had this model shot, I had this movement shot, like I had just the basics. So I guess if somebody's listening, they're just like, man, like, but I love food. It's like, dude, we love food too, but like, let's hit a couple of base hits with some of these meals. Let's have, whether it be monster mash, whether it be just a hamburger patty here and there, whatever it is, just get that, so that way you always have that in your back pocket, so when shit does hit the fan, you at least have that one go-to meal where, like, okay, all right, things got a little weird, but I'm gonna hit my base hit, and then we'll figure it out on the next at bat.
One thing I think people should definitely keep in mind, as far as when it comes to when you're choosing all these foods, right? Be careful of we've talked about this, but be careful when you mix like your carbs and your fat, because like for me, sometimes I'll have 1 to 2 meals, right? So for me, carbs are like a supplement. So if I feel a little bit tired on a certain day, I'll have a little bit extra carbohydrates, and that is for the next day. So I know when I'm feeling a little bit, if I've been putting out a lot of energy, okay, let's have some extra carbs tonight for the next day. But if you're someone who eats through the whole day, be careful of having quite a bit of carbs and quite a bit of fat in each meal, because we know that fat and carbs on their own are not, it's not a bad idea. But when you have a lot of carbohydrates and a lot of fats, that drives you to eat more. It's like when you think of all these junk foods that are out there, like pizza, ice cream, etc., all these are high carbohydrate, high fat, high energy meals or high energy foods, right? So be cognizant of that for yourself. We always talk about, and all of us, Andrew eats more carbs, which isn't a problem, but we're fairly low carbohydrate. And especially when you're dieting, you want to try to make sure that you're not super low fat no matter what you do. If you want to eat moderate carbohydrates, don't let your fats be low, because we know how that can affect your hormones. It can affect your performance. It can even affect like how full you feel. So keep that in mind, that you don't want to go high fat, high carb. kind of choose one as your main energy source. And even if you do choose to go more moderate carbohydrate, make sure you have a minimum amount of fats that you get in each day, no matter what you do.
Yeah, and just
keep it simple. Do your best to keep it simple.
Yeah, super quick clarification, just because I think you just mixed up your words. You said that having high carbs, high fat, it's not a problem, and then you said having high carbs and high fat is a problem, but I think you meant high protein, high fat's not a problem, right?
Did I say having high fat, high carb is not a problem?
Yeah, you said that combo is not an issue, but then the very next.
This is what I meant by that was being high carbohydrate or being high fat in terms of your diet.
Okay.
In terms of your diet is not an issue. You just want to make sure that you're not trying to do both at the same time. Right. So within your same structure, being high carb and being high fat along with protein, that just equals a dreamer bulk. So like you're going to be putting on a lot of fat if you do that. But again, I think it's also how you frame all of this. When you're coming from a place that you haven't really ever dieted before, your nutrition's out of whack, and you come and you start trying to diet, people feel, I'm restricting myself. I want this, I want that, which is why people, they start to tracking your calories can give you an idea of what you can fit in, so you're not restricting so hard. But I feel like we should all figure out a way to reframe that, because in the end of the day, even though we eat these limited foods, I personally don't feel restricted at all. I feel like this is super easy. I get to eat foods that I literally like every single day. And I have the tools to be able to navigate when I do eat out. So I don't feel restricted one bit, but I'm definitely not eating as many processed foods as I ate in the past when I was trying to get in shape and when I was trying to diet. And back then I felt more restricted than I do now.
Let's say you're somebody that likes to celebrate. You like to have something to look forward to. Maybe you can just reframe what you look forward to. Maybe Wednesday night is for ribeyes. Ribeyes are fucking delicious. Maybe every Saturday, maybe you overeat. Like maybe that's a day where you kind of just get after it. Maybe on some of the other days, maybe those are days where you utilize some fasting or something like that. But maybe once or twice a week, you're like, I'm going to get a nice bump of calories on these 2 particular days. I'm going to eat some whole eggs and some, fattier meats and things like that, and just maybe not worry so much about how much you ate for that particular day, but get your fill of what's actually on your food list, but just get extra of it. And maybe on the other days of the week, you are doing something more reasonable. But I personally have found, just kind of so much satisfaction out of sticking to a particular foods and just really jamming in a lot of protein every single day, rather than being super concerned about how many calories I'm eating, or trying to limit the amount of anything that I'm eating. I found it to be more useful to have good food selection, and in that food selection, eat pretty good amounts of food every day.
Yeah, I think one big thing to think about there too is this. It's like you mentioned, like you focus on eating a lot of protein, right? When you think about an individual when you intake a lot of energy and from like fat and carbohydrates, and then you intake some protein, think about people who, like, when you don't work out, though people that do that usually end up also holding a lot of energy. You have a lot of energy on your body as fat, like you have a lot of energy. But when you see individuals who eat a lot of protein and you intake some energy, they tend to also be leaner looking individuals, right? So like that whole idea of like you are what you eat kind of falls directly in line with what you eat. It's not a perfect science, but when you think about it, yeah. Like a lot of people eat excess carbs, excess fats together, minimal protein, and they're holding all that. They're holding that on them. So keep it simple, eat a lot of protein, figure out what you want to focus on in terms of carbs or fats, and just keep a simple food list.
Single ingredient foods can be huge. Obviously, you're not going to just only have single ingredient foods, because you're going to have like a base, and then you'll probably put salt on it, and you might put some seasoning on it. But when we talk about single ingredient foods, we're also kind of more referencing kind of a just not a lot of different macronutrients going on, as Nsima kind of pointed out. The carbohydrate and fat combo, those are combinations that you can eat them in combination with each other, but it's going to be something that's going to most likely encourage you to overeat. Even something like the vertical diet, which talks often about eating meat and rice together, those are things you just want to be conscious of, and you want to pay attention to how lean is the meat that you're eating. You know, if you're going to be eating large amounts of carbohydrates each day, then you might want to pay attention to how lean the meat is that is accompanying it. So for each person, it's going to be a little bit different, because, you know, certain people are leaner than others. But in my opinion, if somebody's like 20% body fat, and they're oftentimes talking about how they feel they need carbohydrates for their particular workouts, I would steer them away from that thought process. I think a lot of people in fitness, and especially the strength community, are sabotaging their ability to get leaner by being grounded and thinking that they quote unquote like need this particular meal to end up giving them a particular result. And that's exactly what we want to steer you away from. Is let's not complicate stuff. Yeah, maybe carbohydrates can assist your workout, but what's your main goal for now? Like let's if your main goal is to be strong and you don't really care about having some extra chunk on you, then keep on keeping on, I guess. But let's make a goal to get like a bicep vein. I think that's reasonable. I think every dude should have a bicep vein going on. And in order to get that bicep vein, you don't necessarily need 250 grams of carbohydrates before your workout. I don't think you need to stagger your carb days and just, in my opinion, there's no reason to overcomplicate any of it. Create a food list. Eat those foods. Some days when you have cravings and you feel a little bit more hungry, maybe address that and say, you know what, I'm going to eat more tomorrow, and see if that craving dies off. If there's still something that you're still craving, then fulfill that need. Eat those fucking cookies. Eat some ice cream, but get back on plan, get back on point. If you can follow it 80-90%, you're going to be winning, and over time you're going to continually teach yourself how to have better and better eating habits. It's going to take you a while though.
So I was going to ask, and you already alluded to it, about, you know, the leaner meats versus, or sources of protein versus the fattier. Other than picking a whether you want a carbs as your fuel source or fat as your fuel source, is there any benefit to going with one or the other if you are at that 20% body fat?
I personally think that people that have gotten themselves to be to people that are unhappy with their body, I believe they've gotten themselves there through eating hyper palatable foods that are processed, and through eating things that are encouraging them to overeat. So the way to reverse your way out of that is to completely do the exact opposite of what you've been doing with yourself for a while, and that's to find foods that don't encourage overeating. People are pretty humans as a whole, we're pretty lazy people, and so you can kind of play into your laziness by making the foods that you want to consume, you can make that a lot easier for yourself, and the foods you don't want to consume, you can make that a lot harder for yourself, simply by not purchasing some of these foods and not having them enter your home is a good way of completing some of that mission. But I would just, I mean, it's not a steadfast rule, but I would urge people towards eating the same way that you would feed your dog until you get yourself to a body fat level that you feel is better off for you. And that would be, you eat twice a day and pretty much should feed your dog meat. And that's what you should be rocking for a while, until you get to get rid of that dad bod and start getting the body that you want.
I think the interesting thing about all of that is because athletes and throughout all of sport, there has been like this just like marriage to carbohydrate intake for performance. Like you even think back to freaking Wheaties boxes, right? Your favorite athlete was on a box of Wheaties. So if you want to grow and become big and strong, you eat your Wheaties, right? You eat this excess energy that's going to help you perform or whatever. But it's a really hard thing to, I guess. And again, we're not saying carbs aren't healthy and they're not good for you, but the idea that you just don't need as much of that to be able to fuel your performance, that's something that you need to kind of experiment with and mess with a little bit, and just learn how to lower that intake and do a few days, a few weeks without any, just so you can really see how that feels. And also there's a time, it takes time to become fat adapted, because that was me my whole life. And I still performed at a high level when I was doing that, but my diet habits were not as sharp. I always felt like I was, if I didn't have carbohydrates, I felt like I was restricting myself. And it took me a while to get out of that. Now it doesn't matter if I have extra carbs or no carbs. There's no restriction that I feel going on, because I know that I can perform either way.
Yeah, I see some people with their their meal plan, and also their like the charts they get from people that help them. And on one day it will say, 50 grams of carbs. The next day it will say 200 grams of carbs. The next day it will say 50 grams of carbs. The day after that will say, so it's like 3 times a week they get to eat this like giant surplus of carbohydrates. Meanwhile, their fat calories are being shifted around as well. They got like 70 grams of fat and then like 50 grams of fat and so forth. And it's just, to me, it's madness. And if you're looking for nuanced stuff and you're going to compete in bodybuilding, you're going to get on a stage or you're doing something very specific, there's no reason to incorporate really specific shit if you're just trying to look good in a tank top or just trying to have your arms look good. You don't need to do any of that. And I really urge people to just stop leaning towards those things. I don't think they're really effective. I see so many people struggle with it, and I don't think that coaches have a good understanding, and I don't even think I have a good understanding of this because I was never obese myself. I was really fat, but I was fat with a purpose, I guess you'd say. I don't think people understand what it's like to be someone who's obese. I don't think you can say, hey, yeah, you could have 100 grams of carbs here and there. I don't think that's wise. I would like to see people really focus in and hone in on protein and fats. And Andrew kind of asked the question earlier, is it healthier to do one way or the other? I think there's still a lot of research that needs to go on with that, but I would just say most of the time people are over consuming calories and over consuming energy from the combination of carbohydrates and fat. And so therefore that leads me to believe that a lot of people, like a large percentage of our population, needs a low carb / maybe even a ketogenic style diet until they can get themselves in better standing. Like we need the pendulum to swing a completely different direction than what everybody's been doing for a long time, because not everyone, but many people have gotten themselves in a really kind of sticky situation.
Yeah, I guess I'll say that the counter argument to kind of sticking with one fuel source and kind of leaning towards the fats is like I've been hearing a lot of people say like, oh, you can have this in moderation. You can still have your carbs and still lose weight, or you can still have your both and lose weight. So I guess what's your guys' take to the counter argument of like, well, you can have whatever you want as long as you have balance. That's the term that I keep hearing a lot lately, is like just have balance and you're going to be fine.
I would say that you can have whatever you want when you have reached the destination. I don't see a lot of people like really just, I do know that there's a lot of individual cases of people achieving success in many, many different ways. But most of the people that I see talking about how you can eat things in moderation are people that are already fit. The people that are talking about eating cereal before their workout, they're usually already lean. They're usually already got the bicep vein going. They're usually already in pretty good standing. They have really good habits in terms of how much energy output they have every day. They have really good habits in terms of their nutrition, and they have probably for decades. And so while the message is a good one, and while it does make sense, again, I think some folks are so into food that you give them a little bit and you give them an inch and they're going to take a mile. And I would just like to see people kind of not have to continue to go through that cycle. So in my opinion, like one of the best things you can do to not get caught up in that carbohydrate cycle is to just try to get rid of them as much as you can.
If there's something that we could think about doing here, it's like if you've been eating a certain way your entire life, it would be a good idea to try something else, because we talk about trying new things all the time on the show, right? So like we all grew up with food in our cupboards as kids. We never had a day where we were truly hungry. We never that was not the norm. So we get into this thing where we're doing sports, etc., and we always have food available, trying to diet, always have food available, always eating when we're hungry. So we talk about fasting on this show, and it's like trying something that you're not used to. Okay, not eating for hours of the day, that's weird. But then we see how beneficial it is for our habits and the way that we look at food, because we grew up always eating when we were hungry. The same thing when it comes to like carbohydrates, right? I grew up high carb all my life, right? So I always performed high carbohydrate. I always did sports, bodybuilding, soccer, all of that stuff. And switching and doing higher fat, doing carnivore for a little bit, learning how it was like to train and perform with no carbs, and then reintroducing those carbohydrates. I've been on both sides, and I can see as an athlete, for me, what works better. So as much as people are saying, yeah, you can lose weight and lose fat eating a moderate to high amounts of carbohydrates. Absolutely. People have done it and people do it. You could do the same thing with high fat, but it's figuring out like which one is going to be more sustainable for you. And you're not going to be able to understand which one is truly more sustainable if you never actually try the other side of things. You know what I mean? If I didn't try what I'm doing right now with fasting, with high fat, with low to no carb, I wouldn't know how good this side of things feels. And I would consistently be like, high carb is the way to go because I can't perform without them.
And use flexible dieting type stuff. And if it fits your macros when you need to be flexible, when you're like, you know what, man, I like when you feel you've lost enough weight to where it's kind of wearing on you, you're starting to get really fucking hungry, maybe take a week. I hate to say diet break, because again, like I try to be careful with my words with folks that are heavier, that have really struggled with their nutrition. Diet break means something totally different to those people, than it does to somebody that is on a fitness journey. But that's a perfect place to implement some moderation. Say, let me have a little moderation for this week. And by moderation, it doesn't mean, start the day off with bagels and pancakes and stuff like that and finish the day with pizza. But it does mean during the week sometime you can get some of those foods, but do so in a moderate way that's not going to cause any extra harm. I think ultimately that's what we're after whenever we're trying to figure out nutrition. How do I cause no harm each day? Well, one way to ensure that you don't cause any harm and to stay very healthy is to make sure that you don't overconsume your calories every day.
Yeah, and so we're kind of leaning more towards the high protein, higher fat, low to no carbs. What are some things people should still avoid if they are going to go down that route? My first thought is like, oh, I'm going to go high fat, so I'm going to start putting butter in my coffee, with the goal of losing weight, in mind. So what are some things like that people, okay, you got the green light to eat more fat, but that doesn't mean eat all of the fat, right?
Yeah, I'd say after, many years of doing keto style diets, I've been messing with them since I was a teenager. I would say that like I'm not really a huge fan of like a high fat diet necessarily. after doing it for so long and after having quite a bit of practice with it. The higher stuff can be satiating. It can be satisfying to some degree. But I think what we're really after is consuming good amounts of protein every day and just making sure we're getting in nutrients that we need every day. We need macronutrients, and we need them in the form of proteins, and we need them in the form of fats. Dietary carbohydrates, I would say utilize those sparingly and utilize those as a tool and maybe even as a supplement to maybe increase performance, because having a big output is also a big part of this. If your output starts to suck, that's not great. But yeah, there's really no reason to go way out of your way to consume a lot of fat. The fat will be accompanied by your protein sources. And so I would say, don't only eat chicken, don't only eat tilapia and just really lean fish. Make sure you get in some ribeye, make sure you get in some salmon and things like that.
Yeah, I totally agree. And the one thing, that's I'm happy you said that, because a lot of people, when they're like, okay, high protein, let me just go buy a bunch of chicken breasts, we go grab some tilapia, like they'll still end up eating really low fat, and they'll be like, why am I feeling so tired and drained and worn down? Well, it's because you're not intaking energy. Like you're barely getting in any fat. So you got to be like, I think we've had so many guests on this show and we've talked so much about red meat that people know that, as far as you're not eating the standard American diet, like red meat is not bad for you. You know what I mean? It's not bad for you at all. So that's something to really keep in mind there. It's a big deal.
There's probably not a lot of reasons to get like 2,000 plus calories a day from your fat, I think like reasonable amounts of fat would be anything between, 75 would be on kind of a lower end, I believe. And I know people are like, oh, it depends on what you weigh and your muscle mass and stuff. Kind of does, but it kind of doesn't. Like what I see from a lot of people is their requirements are all fairly similar. You go approximately, there's people that are going to be way off the charts in one direction or another typically, but approximately 1 gram per pound of body weight in terms of protein. And just think about that. Like, if you weigh 200 pounds, you'll have 200 grams of protein, and then how much fat you should consume could approximately represent about half of that, which would be 100 grams. I think for most people, if I said, hey, have 100 grams of fat every day, have about 200 grams of protein every day, regardless of their body weight, I think they would be successful. Now, you might have to tweak it. You might have to rearrange it a bit. But I think that would work for a lot of people. So the calorie thing is, I think that the whole calorie thing is just not as touchy as we might think that it really is.
Do you guys think that there's benefit if somebody they have a food list, they have their go-to meals, they have their go-to protein sources, and they're pretty much in line with their goals? Do you think there's any benefit, especially at the start, to track some of those calories? And my first thought right out the gate is that yes, it is beneficial, because then they'd be able to see what that caloric intake looks like as opposed to whatever else they were eating, just so that way they can educate themselves.
I personally think so. I think and I'm saying this because I have a bias. Because when I started tracking, I learned a lot about like how much is in certain foods. I learned about like, oh wow, salmon does have quite a bit of fat, or this is what this ground beef has, and like I learned about fat in certain cuts of meat. Just learned what's in food, and it helped me so that now as I navigate things, I feel confident without any type of scale. I don't need to track. But if you build good food habits and make good food choices, you could as easily get the same type of progress. If you're like, okay, I'll have this much, maybe 4 or 5 full palmfuls of protein each day, or I'll have this, you don't have to track as long as you have good food choices and good food habits, and you're not necessarily overdoing it or overeating on anything. But I think for myself, tracking did help me learn like what, when all of this food is together, this is like the caloric amount, and this is what it does for me and how it affects me and my performance. And it gave me that. So I think it can be beneficial as long as you're not using it as a tool to try to fit in as much crap as you can into your caloric intake each day, which is the mistake a lot of people use. They start tracking and then they're like, oh, I can make this fit, I can make this fit, I can make this fit. And it's not doing anything for your goals or what you're trying to achieve. It's more so drawing you back from the things that you actually should be eating. So, yeah.
I think having more information can be useful when you're like a veteran, when you're somebody that has kind of been doing it for a bit. I think the more information, probably the better. But if you're newer to it and you're just, I don't think there's any reason to like overcomplicate anything. But in this particular scenario where somebody already feels like they're built the way they want to be built, they could either, they could add more meals. If they are currently not eating much carbohydrate, they could add in some carbohydrate. You could maybe experiment with surrounding some carbohydrates around like your workouts and stuff like that. But again, I'm not a big fan of really overcomplicating it or making it too specific, unless there's something very, very specific that you're wishing to do, like weigh a certain weight for a powerlifting meet and lift a certain amount of weight. Then maybe it might take a little bit more planning, a little bit more timing, a little bit more math, a little bit more measurement for you to kind of figure those things out. But for me personally, I've never really gotten into much of that. I usually would just cut out a meal, intermittent fast more, or if I wanted to gain, I would just add a meal and kind of keep it at that.
Sorry, muted myself. We've already listed out like a bunch, or we've said a bunch of different food items and some ideas on what people can be eating, but can we list out a couple of things that people can add to their food list? Like, I don't know, maybe let's try to get 5 things that people can focus on, and then from there they can get kind of creative with mixing and matching those certain foods, so that way they can create their actual like go-to food list.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times for me, I eat like eggs, and I eat steak and eggs pretty often. I try to cook them together. I eat salmon from our buddies at Eat Right. I eat turkey. I don't really mix a lot of stuff together that much. My wife will make a dinner. She'll make like a chicken and green beans, or there's usually some sort of chicken something, and it's usually vegetables with it. I don't even like when it comes to just any of it. I really, again, I try to keep it very, very simple. I work towards eating some resemblance of vegetables every day, but they don't always end up in the diet. I normally eat some fruit, but that doesn't always end up in the diet. I'll eat a potato like twice a week or something like that, because I just don't cook them up that often. And the rest of the time, it's pretty much just meat. And I think the more that people can get used to reframing what they're used to eating and the way that they're used to eating, I think a lot of times people would have, breakfast, they'd have 2 eggs, 2 strips of bacon, some hash browns, an English muffin, and some orange juice. People are like, man, that sounds amazing. Like, they get all that variety in. But when you switch your when you switch things over into consuming so much protein every day, you're like, fuck all that, man. I'm just going to take the easy route and cook up like just a couple of eggs. And that's usually what your meal looks like. So for me, my meals are really simple. It's usually like either meat and or eggs. And sometimes they're together, sometimes they're separate. And if I really want to, I guess, cook anything more special for myself, I'll make like an omelet, and that's about as far as I'll take it.
I agree there. I think I'm trying to learn about more ways of chefing things up a little bit. So I'm adding some more things like mushrooms into what I do, and other stuff like that, just to carrots, just to add in some flavor.
Make a big difference.
I think, yeah, even though I think my food tastes great, but like, hey, if I have to cook for a lady, if I just throw a piece of meat in front of her, she might not be like, I like it. Let's not go there, Andrew. That's low-hanging fruit right there. But yeah, like, honestly, like, no vegetables are really off the table. We don't have a vendetta against vegetables. So as far as I know, there's nothing against vegetables. So you can have that in your diet. Just don't let the vegetables be a vehicle. You've said this before. Don't let the vegetables be a vehicle for excessive calories. Right? So if you take some mushrooms or something, and you fry it up in a crazy amount of like oil and whatever, and then it ends up being super massive amount of calories, and then you eat that with some rice, right? Then you're kind of defeating what you're trying to do, right? So it doesn't mean you can't fry up some vegetables, but don't use it as a vehicle for other excess calories, because that's not what we're trying to do. But yeah, I have fruits too every now and then. But again, when it comes to the fruits, I'm not overdoing it. Like, I'm not eating excessive amounts of it. But the cool thing is also that fruits have fiber, and if you're eating them, you'll typically be able to get full pretty quickly. Like, it's going to be hard to go down on 4 apples. Like, no one's going down on 4 apples at a time. So it's not that. Yeah, it's not that much of a problem. It sounds exhausting. But yeah, any types of meats, vegetables. It's so simple. Like, it just like what else? Like, there's a lot of things you can eat, but if you keep it to whole foods and you focus on not having excessive carbohydrates or excessive amount of fats in the same meal, you're typically gonna be okay.
Yeah.
Nothing about human nutrition has fucking changed. We're designed to eat certain things, and we haven't evolved to eat anything else. So
we're not very good at it. Yeah.
It's been the same. It's been the same forever. We do well with protein and fat, and have some little bit of sugary stuff, carbohydrate type stuff here and there. Seems to work really well for us as well. But anything outside of kind of natural foods. Somebody sent me a picture the other day of I don't know if they were trying to give me a heart attack or what they were doing, but somebody sent me a picture the other day of these like grain-free chips. And I'm just like, chips are chips, it doesn't fucking matter. Chips are chips. And so I'm not saying that you can't ever have these things. I'm just saying that let's keep our nutrition where it's at. Let's eat meat and make sure we get in the nutrients that we need. And if there's a little room for play with some calories from some other stuff, maybe that's where you would use some calorie counting. Maybe it sounds very reasonable to me that most people, as long as they can exhibit control on this, a lot of people would be able to just say, you know what, I'm going to eat 300 calories a couple times a week of whatever I want, or 500 calories. But again, that might cause an onslaught of you going way overboard. So pay attention to those Franken foods that are out there too. Those quote unquote, nutrition foods that are out there. It's all a trap, and it doesn't matter if it's our friends at Quest Nutrition or Legendary or whomever. Those are all things that are easy to overconsume, and they all put you in a very similar spot to junk food in the first place. So be careful.
Yeah. As somebody who, I count calories. I haven't been past 2 days, but so the thought of over consuming anything is like, well, no, the science says calories in, calories out. If I over consume, I'm going to gain weight. And, Mark's kind of been coaching me up about getting my protein a lot higher. So one thing that I would like to add that you guys, not that you missed it, but it fits all in the same thing. But like, I've been utilizing a lot of egg whites because I would always focus on getting my protein, in as high as I can in a certain caloric allotment without going too over or too under on fat. And now that I'm trying to load up just a ton of protein right now, I'll have like 4 eggs, and then I'll throw in like a full cup of egg whites. And as somebody who, like, up until like 2 weeks ago even, I assumed that I had to have a lot of carbs in order to feel satisfied, in order to be satiated. And here I am just loading up more protein via egg whites, and I'm getting very full, and I'm feeling very satisfied, and I'm staying full longer, which is an awesome side effect of kind of going low carb right now. So I would encourage people to use something like that. That's just like an awesome source of protein to kind of fill that void where you feel like, man, I think I'm still going to be hungry. Like, just dump some egg whites all over whatever the hell you're eating, because it's just going to add more protein, and it's going to add more volume, especially if you like make it scrambled or whatever. It's going to get fluffy, and it's going to get big, and you know it's almost been like my carb source is like adding eggs to just everything else. It's been it's really eye-opening. It's been great.
It's important that it's cooked too. You know, like sometimes people are like, oh, I'm going to add in tons of protein, and they just try to get it just from liquid sources. And I think that could be a big mistake. I don't think that that's a great way of doing things. I know some people have added like liquid, you know, egg whites to their like protein shakes and stuff. And I think that it's harder to digest and assimilate and stuff like that. But what Andrew is talking about works amazingly. So, you know, I think people should give that some thought, but just keep in mind, people didn't used to count calories. You know, we didn't used to have to, it used to be a thing that we didn't have to concern ourselves with at all, because there wasn't such an abundance of food, and there wasn't so many different things to, I actually wonder even how long the practice has been going on for. Probably been going on for only like 30 or 40 years. Like, it's probably not that old. I know that calories have been around for a bit, and but like people like actively weighing their food, I mean, it can work, and it does work, and I'm not saying that like we've gotten fatter from counting calories. I would never say that, but we used to not count calories. People used to not, you know, have that technology to, you know, you wouldn't like weigh your buffalo meat before you ate it. But we also didn't have the technology of having all these hyper palatable foods around. So it makes sense to kind of measure and weigh some of that to make sure we don't overdo it. But if you stick to natural foods, they're a lot harder to overeat, as Nsima pointed out with like the 5 apple example.
I mean, yeah. I mean, just think about it. It's interesting that I can understand that if you have access to something, it's to tell yourself that you can't have it, or it's flexible dieting is much more, and even the classical sense of flexible dieting, you're not supposed to have a crazy amount of processed foods, but the idea that you can fit in these fun foods consistently, it's nice. But I mean, again, we still are not able to handle that stuff responsibly. Like, we still not able to handle that stuff and not have excessive amounts of it. That's why you see a lot of people who, like, there are people who are very overweight, and they have no control over that, because we can't, unless we have a lot of structure, and unless we're tracking diligently and sticking to that, trying to just have good habits and fit a lot of that stuff in is kind of difficult. I'm not saying that you have to totally let go of it, but just have it be such a small amount of what you do, or totally let go of it, and it'll make everything as far as like your health so much easier. So just keep that in mind. We're still not used to this shit.
Something that's been pretty helpful to me is to understand and know that everything is on the table. Nothing is necessarily detrimental. However, it's only at certain times, you know. So like for me, if I do want to eat something that's off plan, it's not like I need a schedule for it. because I am pretty rigorous with my nutrition. If something was to spring up and I thought, hey, this could enhance this particular situation, then I'm going to let's say I run into an old friend. I go to a restaurant and an old friend like wants to buy me a beer and just fucking talk. I'm down. I'm into it. I'll figure it out, you know? Again, if I think it's going to enhance that particular situation, then I'll gravitate towards it. But I know that some people, you know, kind of get concerned about whether food is good or whether food is bad. I do think it's okay to say that some foods are bad, but I think it's overwhelming to think that you're not ever going to have access to those foods again. Probably unreasonable to think that you're not ever going to eat those again. They are just on specific occasion for specific times, and possibly, this is also important to know, possibly for you, you should not eat these things for a while. And it could be you might need to be sober from them for a while. You might need to fast away from them for a while, because these could be things that could be potentially ruining your life. And it's a little bit of a trap to think, oh man, I just want to have that thing again because I want that satisfaction or that impulse that you're drawing off of. But sometimes it's a trap, could lead you down the wrong path. And for me personally, just leaning into what we've been talking about here more and more and more and more has given me kind of a stronger foundation and a stronger structure to build everything else off of.
What about those that are saying, or the thought process of like, if I stray away from it, it's going to lead to binge eating on whether that food or maybe similar foods? That's what I hear a lot of, and it comes from, you know, like the flexible dieters that are going to say, okay, maybe don't have that version of it, have like a low calorie version that's similar, that's going to get you, I don't know, we'll say like it's not a 10 out of 10, it's more like 6 or a 7 out of 10, but it could satisfy that craving and then you be on your way.
I think most of the time, anything that's going to kind of keep you in the game is going to keep you kind of on the longer path, is going to be the thing that will probably have the greatest result. So, you know, Stan Efferding kind of points out compliance is a science. So being able to follow through on something is massively important. So, and understanding like your binge or night, you know, eating in the middle of the night, you know, things like that. What I usually suggest for people that really struggle with things like that is to not try to eliminate them, because when you try to eliminate them, it's very, very difficult to do, and it's going to take time. And so you can try to cold turkey it, but for most people, I've found that doesn't really work. Just try to, like you pointed out, Andrew, try to have a better option lined up. And as I pointed out a little earlier in the show, is have a better option lined up that's super convenient. And whatever is that trigger, whatever that other thing is, keep that as far away from you as possible. You know, potentially don't even have it in your house so you don't end up on that binge. But I think restricting yourself to not do something that you're so used to doing is very difficult, and it could take a while. So that's why I kind of would push most people towards, you know, instead of waking up in the middle of the night and eating cookies, you know, if you do wake up in the middle of the night, rather than just forcing yourself back to bed every single time, which might not work well, maybe just have like a protein shake or just something slightly different. So it's not encouraging you to binge and clear out the pantry.
I think along with that, there should be I think one of the big goals that I've had was just never having the feeling of being controlled by my hunger or by food, right? So it never feels good after a binge. You don't feel good. You feel like you lost control. You feel like you didn't have a handle on yourself, right? And all these things that you're trying to do in the diet, as far as maybe not eating certain foods as much, or let's say that you do go for like a legendary Pop-Tart, which are fucking great, right? So you don't go and eat a bunch of actual sugary Pop-Tarts or whatever. That's a win. That's a win in and of itself. But you do want to get yourself to a place where you do have a full handle on it, and you can just totally say no to those foods and not feel like you a certain way about it. You don't feel like you are restricting. You don't feel like you are missing out on anything. And to get there, it is going to take some letting go of those foods for a period of time. So there's nothing wrong with not fitting it into your diet. There's nothing wrong with just getting it out, because the goal is to never feel controlled by it again. And the only way to do that is by not having it for a while.
And Nsima brings up a really good point of like, where did this behavior come from? And so sometimes these things are like a deeper dive into some soul searching. But this is stuff I used to do with my kids when they were little, is I would try to figure out where this behavior came from. You know, you got my attention. Why did you feel it was important to be disrespectful? You know, and they're like, and it's just an open conversation. I'm not mad. I got my dad hat on. I'm open to listen. You're not going to get in trouble for anything. Like, why, where did this behavior come from? Mm-hmm. And they could say, I don't know, I didn't feel like doing it, or whatever it might be. You know, they'll always have some kind of, usually like a lame excuse. But when you come back and talk to them later, they'll kind of bring something else up. They'll say, well, you were paying more attention to Quinn than you were to me. And you're like, damn, okay. But you'll find that with yourself. When you start examining yourself more, you'll uncover and discover shit. Like, why do I feel I need to do that? I know I don't need to do that. I know I have 100 pounds of excess body weight on me that I don't necessarily need. I recognize that's an energy source for the body. I recognize that I'm storing that energy and that I don't need to continue to do that any longer. And so as hard as that kind of stuff is, it's great to kind of re-examine what that is and try to break yourself free of that. Can be really, really liberating, but also very challenging.
And I think it goes back to what we said in the previous episode. You know, if you're saying like, yeah, I do want to lose X amount of weight, and then maybe you get some help from somebody, and your first question is like, when do I get a cheat meal? Like, let's change the mindset and let's really go for it, right? Like, let's not try to find loopholes in the diet and get some of these. I mean, I'm guilty. I eat something weird almost every day, except for past couple of days have been good, but I'm definitely one to make like the low fat French toast and all these other weird foods, because I'm trying to just kind of find that loophole. But now I'm eating more whole foods, feeling pretty good, and it's been a pretty fun experience. But I think if we get our mindset right and just understand that we're gonna kind of say peace to some of these foods for now, and then once we actually get our shit together, we can come back and really just have fun with it.
You're still on a pretty damn strong path of continually making progress, though, too, especially from what I've seen from you over the last couple of years. You're continually working on and towards, and like, I think that's important for people to do. And it just be in recognition, like, this fucking might take me 5-6 years. It's kind of like trying to get a degree. How long do people go to school for? Usually 2 years, 4 years, depending on what kind of degree you're looking for. It takes a certain amount of time. It takes time to learn nutrition. There's some people that just, for whatever reason, were never really all that connected to food, and they have sort of a disconnect to it. They don't have to really worry about it much. And so maybe the switch for them was quick and easy. Maybe they were able to get their degree a lot faster than you might get yours. But man, I feel like I'm still working on it every day. It's gotten easier. Like, it's gotten way easier to figure out, but it's taken many years of lifting, many years in the gym, many years in the kitchen, many years of not being in the kitchen. A lot of time spent eating and a lot of time spent away from eating to, like, learn what Nsima said, learn a little bit more control. Want to take us on out of here, Andrew?
Sure will. Thank you, everybody, for checking out today's episode. If you found it helpful, if you think this can help somebody, please hit that like button, hit subscribe if you haven't done so already, ring that damn bell so that way you guys know when we, because we've been launching out tons of episodes lately, and it would be very easy to have missed anything. So please hit that notifications button so that way you get notified every time we upload something. And we still are doing the live podcast where we do Q&As and all kinds of fun stuff like that you guys can be a part of. And again, share this with somebody that needs to hear this. If you know somebody that's struggling making their food list, maybe this will help them. Thank you, Element, for sponsoring today's episode. Show them some love. Head over to drinklmnt.com/power project, along with some of the stuff we talked about today. About sticking, changing that mindset. This can be one of those ways that can help you kind of get through some of those cravings and help you with if you do decide to fast. It just it gives you a little something to look forward to every single day. Again, drinklmnt.com/power project. Links to them down in the description as well as the podcast show notes. Follow the podcast at Mark Bell's Power Project on Instagram, at MB Power Project on TikTok and Twitter. My Instagram and Twitter is at I am Andrew Z. Nsima, where you at?
Nsima Inyang on Instagram and YouTube, at Nsima Inyang on TikTok and Twitter. Mark?
At Mark Smelly Bell. Strength is never weakness, weakness never strength. Catch y'all later. Bye.